y'all, welcome back to the Reading Stack. I'm Hunter, and I have a great read with me today. It is Up From Slavery, an autobiography of Booker T. Washington by Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington was an educator in I'd say the turn really of the 19th century, so from about the 1890s up until his death in 1915. He was a very influential African-American figure, both really in a lot of ways in terms of labor, mostly education, civil rights, and even an advisor to presidents. And so this particular book, Up From Slavery, is just 100 pages. It's a pretty short read. And I really enjoyed this book. I really wanted to learn a lot more about civil rights. So I've been reading books in this general area in the past, moving forward through the history of civil rights. And this book was really interesting in showing how Booker T. Washington, was born in slavery as a kid, working on a plantation. He said he has no memories of ever playing as a child. Just, there's so many shocking things about that. I don't believe, if I remember correctly, he may have met his mother once. Never knew his dad. His dad was a nearby plantation owner, I believe. And there was just a lot of real tragedy, around the slavery, of course. And it was just a really crazy deal, him describing that and that transition out of slavery. Till the point that he's working, getting an education, and ultimately gives back, becomes a leader in education, founding Tuskegee University in Alabama. But yeah, this book, it really shows in a good way, the rapid changes in American society in several key ways and places. One of the things near the end of the book, it talks about when he's on a boat, at the point when he's coming back from Europe, he remarks how Frederick Douglass, another leader around the time in similar areas, when he was on a boat, was not permitted earlier to go into the cabin of the ship, so he had to stay out on the deck, I presume, and I guess sleep there. Just really crazy. Lack of hospitality and just bigotry, ignorance, as this book commonly says, ignorance, as racism and prejudice, great ignorance. And you see Booker T. Washington, the way he writes and talks about it, it really has a lot of pity on the Southerners and those that really held those racist, prejudiced ideas. A lot of the stuff I've written, the way a lot of the people that were living in these times, they saw just the pity, the ignorance of the Southerners and those with racially based motives, just is very pathetic or pitiful for letting that steer their hearts as to how they would treat another human being. But really interesting, just showing the rapid pace of development in our country through the time of Reconstruction, following the Civil War up to the turn of the century. And one interesting theme in the book, you see through his life, his interaction with really three groups of people and several key junctures in his life where they all are in the same place coming together, and that's the Northerners, the Southerners, and the, as the book would say, the Negroes or the African Americans. Various times where they would meet up to hear him speak or what have you. And so this book is really interesting, and I think one thing you really see throughout it is you see Booker T. Washington really have a passion for education. And he has a real holistic approach to education, to where a lot of the people that would go to school there, it wasn't just merely this academic learning like most universities today, learning French or sociology, whatever the subject could be. But a lot of it, people were expected to kind of work or labor, and there was ways that could help, pay for their education. And it's just really highly esteemed and valued by him. He was just such a laborer, and he learned that lesson in his own education really trying to make ends meet and receive an education. But that's really interesting, that holistic type of education where people are getting educated, but they're also getting that labor built in to really shape their character and to give them an appreciation and a value for work. Well, I'm going to read a few quotes from the book just to show you what's in the book. And page 16, we have our first quote. It reads, "More than once I have tried to picture myself in the position of a boy or man with an honored and distinguished ancestry which I could trace back through a period of hundreds of years, and who had not only inherited a name, but fortune and a proud family homestead. And yet I have sometimes had the feeling that if I had inherited these and had been a member of a more popular race, I should have been inclined to yield to the temptation of depending upon my ancestry and my color to do that for me which I should do for myself. Years ago I resolved that because I had no ancestry myself, I would leave a record of which my children would be proud, in which it might encourage them to still higher effort." So a lot of it, is about labor, achievement, and doing for oneself, one's responsibility, and not kind of resting on the laurels of another, because really coming out of slavery, he had nothing, really not that ancestry and that kind of deep support network. Really, he had to carve out his own success story, and it's just really amazing to see how it progresses through his life, through the hard work, how it pays off in the long run. Page 25. "Before the end of the year, I think I began learning that those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. This lesson I have tried to carry with me ever since." So one thing you see is, as he's trying to build the educational institutions he's a part of, he needs help with capital from a philanthropist and just kind, generous donations. And a lot of times those come, unsolicited. But he really needs help a lot, and help comes in various ways. And what he truly sees through those people that contribute, that lend their hands or lend their time, their money, whatever it could be, that they are the happiest, that they're really, as he says, he refers to them, as great men and women as opposed to small men and women. Their hearts are just extremely large, and they make a huge difference on his life and the people that would be receiving an education through their contribution. Another passage that really struck me is on page 37, and it reads this: "Tuskegee seemed an ideal place for the school. It was in the midst of the great bulk of the Negro population, and was rather secluded, being 5 miles from the main line of railroad, with which it was connected by a short line. During the days of slavery, and since, the town had been a center for the education of the white people. This was an added advantage, for the reason that I found the white people possessing a degree of culture and education that is not surpassed by many localities. While the colored people were ignorant, they had not, as a rule, degraded and weakened their bodies by vices such as are common to the lower class of people in the large cities. In general, I found the relations between the two races pleasant. For example, the largest, and I think at that time the only hardware store in the town was owned and operated jointly by a colored man and a white man. This co-partnership continued until the death of the white partner." So in one part there he says that the place where they began their school in Tuskegee was really an ideal place, that there was some harmony between the Southerners that were there and the Negroes, as the book refers. But also it does say that the people there were pretty honorable, that they hadn't degraded and weakened their bodies by vices, such as are common to the lower class of people in the large cities. And that just really struck me as thinking about a lot of. Let me sidetrack here. Like, I have a friend who's from Pakistan that lives in Tennessee currently, but lived most of his life, well into his adult years in Pakistan. And one thing that's pretty interesting, he told me, was the majority of Pakistan is Muslim, and he's a Christian. And what's really interesting is the Muslims do not drink, but they will sell alcohol to Christians. And it's kind of this idea or this undertone that it's all right for the Christians in that society to drink, dissipate themselves through, over consuming alcohol. And I believe it was they would be given to them for free, and that was really the thing. And it just that right there just really makes me think, as well as what I've heard about in Russia, in some of the I guess you'd say the Eskimo groups, the Aborigines in Siberia, and they're the Russian communist government, maybe the Tsarist government before them, would give, just give them tons of vodka and stuff in their communities and really weaken them, Not that alcohol's a vice, but we know that overconsumption of it's very dangerous for relationships, for one's development, and for one's health. I thought that was very interesting. Saying that these people were virtuous, but you can just see the effect of vice, as it says, and it just really made me think, like, the lower classes of people, they may have these vices peddled to them, be it gambling or substances or prostitution or all those things that are considered vice, and it's just really sad, I think. But it also is a good reminder that, as he says, the lower classes, his observation, to truly go to middle class, upper class, you have to avoid those vices. It's just another example of how moral values and following through on those pays off in the long run. And character, how important that is, that it's more valuable than money. To me, that was just a really great passage showing that. And truly, it's, if I think about a city or a society and wanting to improve that, I would definitely want to think about that element, not just to say, oh, well, these things aren't connected, but, to better society and to better our neighborhoods, we have to think about that connection between the various vices and people and their income status. And I just thought that was a really good passage to get that kind of conversation to stew on in the brain. And on page 48, we have our final quote I'll share from here. It begins, "I knew that in a large degree we were trying an experiment, that of testing whether or not it was possible for Negroes to build up and control the affairs of a large education institution. I knew that if we failed, it would injure the whole race. I knew that the presumption was against us. I knew that in the case of white people beginning such an enterprise, it would be taken for granted that they were going to succeed. But in our case, I felt that people would be surprised if we succeeded. All this made a burden which pressed down on us, sometimes it seemed, at the rate of 1,000 pounds to the square inch." So the way he's kind of emphasizing is his perspective was, if we've got one shot at this, that if we fail, it could be a great setback, because people would see their endeavor as a group of individuals. They would apply that collectively to much more than them, to the whole race, African Americans. And it just shows how important their struggle was, that they ran well, they finished well, that it would be that precedent and that example for so much more. So it just really adds a lot of tension into the book about the struggle they were going through. And boy, they really had to contend and work hard, long hours, and sacrifice just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to accomplish that. And as we know today in America, education, you expect it's well available for all, and it wasn't that way at one time. And so it's the hard work of gentlemen like Booker T. Washington and others, a lot that are mentioned in this book, that really drove took the ball down court, so to speak. They really laid the groundwork for what was to come, to have education for all. Another thing in the book is one of the people he describes so much is a man that he says had the greatest influence on his life. And to me, he sounds through the story like a central theme, like a surrogate father, a mentor, just a very godly example to Booker T. Washington, that really the philosophy that just is clearly lived out by this man goes directly into him, that affects the broader institution. And it was a General Samuel Armstrong. And just if you read this book, you'll be so impressed with this guy, and you will really be thinking about your actions and your influence and how you can inspire people. Just what this guy did, he didn't want any credit for it. A lot of this was good he did in secret that totally just changed this guy's life, where this guy had a perspective that was down here. This General Armstrong encouraged him just, to the level of heaven, just blew his mind wide open with the possibilities and the capability for good. And so if you read that, I think you'll really get a lot out of that, of General Samuel Armstrong, a Civil War general that became heavily involved in education, and is in here, I believe it was the Hampton Institute or University that he became the president of, and that's how they met when Booker T. Washington went to study there. So does this book belong on your bookshelf? I'd say yes. If you're looking for a short biography that would be very great, a very American biographical story, if you want to know about the history of labor in America, the history of education, the history of civil rights in America, this is an invaluable book to show you just really that very transformative time in America, from the end of the Civil War, the abolition of slavery in the United States, till today. The people that carried the torch from that moment, that set the course for all the civil rights changes, the labor changes, the education changes. A lot of things we take for granted today were all just in doubt back then, and it was men that really sacrificed a lot to make it so. And their example is something great to learn from, to remember and appreciate. And it's a short read, so it's just 100 pages. It really, when I got down to it, it took me about two days worth of reading. And reasons why you wouldn't like it, well, this particular copy, I don't think it's the best copy ever made. As you see, it's like the print's very small. I think it's such a good book, it would deserve maybe a better binding and bigger wording. In my copy, it's probably really small, 11-point font or smaller. But if you can find a better copy, I'd say go for that. But other than that, if you don't have an interest really in this time period, Reconstruction, civil rights, and a lot of it's very much on education, history of colleges in America, then you may want to pass on that and read perhaps something else. And what's the greatest lesson I really took away from this book? Well, there's several. The number one thing I think, though, he really emphasizes is that labor is good. And he's not just talking about jobs here. It's not just the 9 to 5 job you have, but just labor, that expenditure of energy into something good. If it's working in your garden, if it's writing a poem, if it's digging, just anything you labor in is a good thing. That it pays off dividends that you may not realize in the moment. When we expend our energy and labor for some purpose that's good, it builds character, it builds virtue, it refines us, and through what we do, just like me putting out the videos, I've gotten some very encouraging comments from y'all, the stuff y'all read and have interest in, and I thank you so much for commenting and liking. To just say, with labor, or what we do, what we output, we receive these unexpected blessings from places we never know. There was many times in the story where he was just despairing, where's this money we need gonna come from? But it will always come out of the corner someplace. It was just always there, and he had his needs provided for. But he was very much a hard worker, and I think in our society, we want things super free, super cheap and easy. But there's a value and appreciation through hard work and the discipline of labor that we wouldn't get just having it free and clear, easy, instant. Also just neglect or laziness, it cost us big. But just a little bit of labor can go a long way towards something great, stuff we can't even imagine. And I'll leave with this proverb that relates to that theme I have written on the board over here. It says, "The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor." And that's Proverbs 12:24. And basically the principle is that if you work hard, if you're diligent, you'll be in a position of, you could say, leadership, influence, power, ruling, as their idea would be that. And then, but the slothful would be put to forced labor. So that's like slavery, that's painful, that's unpleasantry through being slothful and not being diligent. So I'd say just that good labor is a very valuable lesson. And I hope you will check out this awesome book, Up from Slavery, one of the most inspirational books I've read in a long time, and such an interesting life. I definitely want to study and know more about this man. Well guys, thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll have more videos and content for y'all soon. Y'all have a wonderful day, and we'll see y'all again soon. Bye.